Hello, welcome. I'm live. Everything's working, hopefully. At least you can let me know when you hop on. All right. Welcome to the only edition of Tips for Confident Norwegian that's streaming really live this April. I've had some massive timetable issues and other things, and I'm not sure what it will be like in May, but I'm working to get my older live streams cut for you, and I'll be publishing them on YouTube so that you don't miss out on anything in the weeks when I cannot stream live. Like for example, next week when there is påskeferie. But I'm live here today, and I want to talk about this phenomenon that I meet very often with my students, that I've met myself in learning languages, and that has different names as well, because it's a very well-known, a very well-described phenomenon in language learning, and that's the feeling of slowing down as you get past the initial levels. Sometimes this is referred as the OK plateau, or the intermediate plateau is another term that refers to the same, that hits at around the B1 level, when you're kind of able to say everything in a way, and the immediate motivation to learn, to get the basics in, drops, right? We'll be talking a little bit about this, but I want to give you a perspective shift on language learning as well, most importantly, because you don't have to feel this intermediate plateau, this OK plateau, or even the phase running towards it, right? You don't have to feel it as a problem. You don't have to feel bad about it. You can embrace the process knowing that this is how the process goes. You can also hack it a little bit. So let's talk about this rather than describing the plateau, which I have done elsewhere and many people have. It's really a well-described phenomenon. Let's have a look at what you should do or could do with your feeling, maybe of inadequacy, maybe of despair, maybe of frustration, right? Maybe anger even, knowing that you might be working the same amount on it, but the feeling of progress that you initially had in your course is not there. Or maybe your motivation drops massively, which could also be a result of the outputs of your learning efforts not being the same anymore. Your motivation drops massively, and you would like it to be up, but it's not there. I've talked about motivation elsewhere as well, and it's a very important factor always. And just to repeat, the most important thing about the motivational component here is that I like to look at motivation the way John Connelly described it. And he says motivation is not created, it will occur when you see something as very beneficial for yourself in the future, and when you see it is possible for you to achieve. And see, that's subjective, isn't it? That's about our perspective, that if we don't feel we can achieve it, even if it looks like something super beneficial, we would love it, we won't get motivated if we don't believe that we are able to get there, right? So motivation is like a result of these two components. And when your pace and your results start dropping, of course, this is going to also get back at your motivation, right? And kind of push it down. This is a very natural process. Okay, so that's like the outline of what we'll be talking about today. One thing I want to mention before we start diving deeper into the details, and I'll be giving you some very concrete examples to show you how this works in practice. I want to say that right now, all my courses are running, and my one-on-one spots are kind of all full, or like almost all full. But there is this one course that's self-paced that you can join if you wanted to get to the bottom of these things, and not only these things. And this course is Dare to Speak Out in Norwegian. It's a self-paced course. It's scheduled for 6 weeks, but you can do it more quickly or more slowly. I publish everything for you at the same time. It includes a consultation with me if you get through all the material. And it's a course about language learning mindset. It's in English to give you the basics, to get you into the right perspective so that learning the language efficiently is possible for you, as well as the crucial techniques and strategies for learning. So it's a combination of mindset work and reflection work to kind of figure out where the problem is, where the hindrance is in your process. And as well as that, you will acquire the most crucial speaking and transferring techniques as well. Transfer is very important from learning, from your textbook, maybe from Duolingo, whatever it might be you're using for the learning part, and into actually speaking in practice. There is a big gap that we don't realize. I've talked about it as well in my live streams. And there are techniques for bridging it. So this course is a combination of mindset work and these techniques that are the most crucial. So that's just a word of recommendation. That's the one course that you can join right now, and the link is in the description of the live stream. So check it out. All right, and now diving into this topic of the frustration and the slowing down of the process. The first thing I want to say is that your learning pace might have slowed down, and it might have not slowed down. Maybe your motivation really dropped, and that might have to do with your frustration and with your belief whether or not you can succeed beyond the initial level. It can also have to do with the other component of motivation, which is you don't see this as that beneficial any longer, right? You've covered the basics, you kind of understand something, and you would like to, but it's not, perceived as that valuable anymore. So the motivation can be dropping from both sides. So you might actually slow down. It might be that. But very many times it's not an actual slowdown, it's a perceived slowdown. And that's because if you learn 10 words and you knew 0 before, that's such a huge increase. It feels like a lot. If you know 4,000 words, 5,000, and you learn 10 words, it feels like nothing. And most of these words will be related to these other words you knew before anyway, because that's how it works later on, right? You won't be learning very many like shocking words that don't relate to anything else unless these are specialized. And you'll be like, I learned nothing today, right? But in your first lesson, if you learned the very same amount of things, it would feel like a lot, because we have this tendency to look at stuff in a way, like comparing it to the thing that we had before, or to these other things, like proportionally. So if you learn 10 new words in a lesson, that's actually a massive achievement. Usually we don't learn that many words in terms of actually owning them afterwards in one session. When I was doing my teacher training, they said, like, if you run a vocabulary lesson, the maximum number of units of vocabulary items for that vocabulary lesson of 45 minutes is 7, not more. And thinking that running 3 45-minute lessons after each other will triple the amount that you can cover during that afternoon is wishful thinking, isn't it? It doesn't work that way. So we have our capacities, and we also have to get in the spaced repetition, as I often talk about, to really get these things, these items of vocabulary, for example, into our long-term memory. And we have to meet them on multiple occasions in different contexts to really acquire them. And acquiring is our goal, right? Acquiring means that we are actually able to use them, and we don't have to think, and we own them. It's like saying tusen takk. You don't have to think about that. You even have the pronunciation in place because you have acquired it. This is not just learning. And the point is that your pace might be the same, but it feels like it's massively slower because the progression of language learning from 0, let's say it's like A0 or maybe A1, where you're starting, and until, say, B2, which is the end goal in a way for very many people, even though it's not a super proficient level, but it's something that very many people would be happy with having certified. The progression is very far from linear in terms of time and in terms of the effort that you have to spend to progress from one level to another. And this is something I also talk about quite often in many of my live streams and in my content in general, from different angles, that these levels, it doesn't mean 3 months of learning. It doesn't mean a textbook of learning. It means a level that you progress in your ability to function within that language. And that has nothing to do with linearity in terms of time or in terms of efforts or how many, say, hours of input you have to listen to get there, how many things you have to study in your textbook even, right? And from 0 to A2, for an educated adult who has learned a language before, it can take 2 months if you really work on it. It might take much longer depending on your other obligations and on your language learning mindset. That's why I was talking about the course, the Dare to Speak Out in Norwegian course, which is basically all about the mindset plus the techniques. This is very important because it can be slowing you down massively, but it's going to be rather quick anyways, if you have a lot of school background and things like that. But from A2 to B1, it takes longer than from 0 to A2. It typically takes longer. Or it takes more effort, more hours of exposure to really progress there. And why? It's because the definition of the A level, A1 and A2, is that that's a beginner level. That's a level where you can do something with the language, you can understand something, you can say something, even if it's just isolated words, you kind of make it work somehow. But you would need a lot of help from the listener, from your conversation partner, so that this thing is actually viable, right? You couldn't fix things independently in that language. You would have to switch into another language to really make things work. So if you're at A2, that's a level where you can fix a number of things if your conversation partner is willing to really help you out, right? And it mustn't be a very specialized topic and so on. The B levels, B1 and B2, are independent levels. And that's the big difference, because it takes quite a lot of both mindset shifting for some of us and actually working with the language, getting used to the language, listening to the language, to become independent with it, to become an independent speaker of that language. So at level B1, which is a goal for very many people, the B1 muntly, because of the current requirement for the citizenship or other requirements of that sort, right? Very many people are interested in that B1 muntly, and very few people know what it means. So the B1 level is what you might call an emerging independent level. You are not fully independent, but if you read these descriptions that Kompetanse Norge has put together for assessing whether or not a candidate is at that level, the word independence, in a way, selvstendig, right, occurs quite a lot in those descriptions themselves, as opposed to the A2 level, which it's kind of assessed against in many cases if you take the A2 B1 part, right? And what they want to see at B1 is you might cause a misunderstanding with your language occasionally, especially if you venture for something more complex, like complex sentences or a more abstract topic. It's okay, that not all the time, but if you cause like 1-2 misunderstandings, you might still pass with it. You might need a little bit of help from the examiner to kind of, push you a little bit, but they have to push you all the time. You're going to fail the B1 level because of that. Even if you have perfect grammar, which you probably don't if you're sitting the A2 B1, but it's not just the grammar, right? It's what you can do with the language. And at B1 level, you have to be independent. And of course, this doesn't only pertain to studying Norwegian in that traditional way. Somebody can be very independent with using language and very eloquent generally as a person, right? And these people, of course, will have an easier time passing these exams and attaining these levels. Even if their grammar is all over the place, there is a grammar requirement. But as I was saying, you can even cause some misunderstandings at that level. That's not the most difficult thing what you have to get, but you have to get to the independence of using the language. And B2 is a level of full independence with the language. And of course, the requirement for grammar, for vocabulary is also increasing with that. And again, from B1 until B2, more time would be typically required than from 0 to A2. And notice that I'm considering from 0 to A2 as one level, even though it's strictly speaking two. But for educated adults, dividing A1 and A2 is actually not a practical thing at all. It's even treated as one level in the textbooks, which is kind of good, yeah. But still, even if you take two levels, the two A levels together, it takes less time to get from 0 to A2 and from A2 to B1, yeah. And we're not still speaking about writing, right? That's more of an academic skill. So this is just for context. This is not linear. What is linear is textbooks, right? The progression looks very neat, very logical, and very, very linear in your textbook and in your course. If you look at the course curriculum, if you go for one of these more traditional courses in a private language school, they will roll out the curriculum for you. And you're like, oh, okay, all these things, good. It looks logical. It looks like boom, 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 done. And if you've ever done it, you know that it's like boom, 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 not done, right? It's not done because the language acquisition within your head and within your body, because this is also a physical process with your speaking muscles, but also with your kind of emotional resistance sometimes, which is partially physical. The process is messy and it is not linear at all. And this is a big misconception or a big kind of underlying belief that we have. And we've acquired it based on the materials. We look at it and we're like, yes, of course, check, check, check. If your end goal was doing well on progress tests, then yes, this would work. It would be linear, it would be neat. But progress tests have a very long way to, the real life usage. It's not, the progress test is not what you want to be performing when you speak to your neighbor and you want to be casual. You don't want to fish for the language and you want to be, just speaking, right? Or if you want to present something at work so that you don't have to work tremendously just to make it happen. For the first time, you will work tremendously anyway, but it's not your end goal, right? And this is a very important point, a very important mindset shift to get in, that what is linear is if somebody shows you this graph, this kind of visual of like A1, A2, B1, B2 with the arrows, right? That's linear. The picture is linear, right? If somebody shows you the textbook and the curriculum on the first page, that's linear. But your real life and language usage and language, not even learning, but let alone acquisition, which means the language that you own, that's very messy. Language acquisition is a very messy process. And it is 3D. And what I mean by this is that if I like to imagine the course or the textbook as a 2D structure, it's linear, it's neat, it kind of makes sense, it looks like it makes sense, and it is a model of the reality. It's far from the reality. We have to make a model to put it in a textbook. That's inevitable, and it doesn't have to be necessarily wrong if everybody understands that they are treating a model of the reality, not the reality itself, which I don't think everybody understands, not even many teachers, which is sad. And then you put your hands on a real book and you're like, wait, but this is different, right? Even a very simple children's book, you have a look at it, and in the first sentence, it says something you totally don't understand, and your nominal level in the textbook you're doing might be between B1 and B2. And these kids are like 2-year-olds who read that book, and you're like, that doesn't make sense. Why are they using like 4 in this way? It doesn't make any sense, right? And what would be great for you at that point would be having someone to ask that question to so that you will discover, because when you're sitting there wondering, you are really well prepared and open to receive the answer and implement it and acquire it, right? Because the motivation to learn something comes from these real life sources. You see it and you're like, I wonder. Then ask, right? And you can have your textbook on the side and you might be connecting the dots. That's why I'm saying that language acquisition is a 3D process. It's probably more than 3D, but let's say 3D. You have your textbook and you might be doing a course. I think it's a good thing if you kind of enjoy it. You have some structure, you maybe have some homework to keep you accountable. You have some possibility, hopefully, to ask your teacher questions and you can receive some good answers. If not, that's sad, but you can always fire your teacher and find another one or find a different course where you have good references that the teacher actually answers questions in a sensible way, right? And it's okay, but it's not the only thing. And what I want to show you with some examples now is that if you have your explicit studies of any sort, it could be with an online platform, it could be with a private teacher, it could be a classic course, it could be a less classic course, it could be a self-study course, it could be Duolingo for that matter, anything that you're doing which is explicit grammar or vocabulary studies, or maybe even technique studies. And then if you combine it with real life exposure, might be your colleagues. They just tell them, run the meeting in Norwegian. I'm actually above B1 level here. I'll be answering in English, but run the thing in Norwegian. I want to learn and I'm capable of understanding, which you know if you are or if you aren't. Many of my students are actually capable of taking this partial step. We're like all or nothing, right? If you say, you guys run the thing in Norwegian, I'll present my points in English. Is that okay for you? It will mostly be okay for them, and you will get very good exposure, right? And if the meeting is boring, all the best, you sit back and you get the language in, and you can be noticing the stuff that you were learning in your textbook, putting it together and creating the 3D matrix of real life language learning, right? So let me give you one example from my lesson with a student some time ago. It was a group course actually. Somebody was asking me, how do you say in Norwegian that a wasp stung me? And I was a bit like, wait, I think I know the verb for this, but I had to double check so that I didn't bullshit them. So I went and double checked. So that was a learning moment for me, right? I still have these. Sometimes I get confused because like my languages are all intertwined at some point. Sometimes I actually don't know it because many of my students have specialized topics like medieval history, for example. So I love it. I learn a lot of things, but I don't necessarily know what the words they're asking about even mean in English. So I have to check a lot. So I still have these learning moments with my students. I love it. So I double checked quickly, and the verb is å stikke. Yeah. And I told the student, we moved on. And then a few days later, and this looks like a synchronicity or whatever, or like a coincidence, but these things will happen to you, not because it's some kind of magic the universe is sending you, even though you might believe it if you prefer, but it's because you are primed, right? You have this issue in your head, like, okay, is this like stikke, yeah, versus sting in English, which is a bit different. And you are primed to see it all over you, right? It's like buying a car. That's the example that's very commonly used for this cognitive filter. You want to buy a car, you start checking out these brands, and suddenly everybody is driving that car that you've chosen or the one that you're considering, right? Or you think like, oh, maybe I might get a baby, and suddenly pregnant women start popping up everywhere, right? You didn't see them before. There are not more than before, but you see them now. It's like this cognitive bias, right? And it's the same with the language. So you can use your Norwegian course or the things that you were wondering about and checked and got your answer in this way. And you will be more prone, more sensitive to kind of see these things around you in your reading, in your listening. When you tell your colleagues to run the meeting in Norwegian, you will notice the grammar points that you kind of looked at. If you open up to it, you will notice the verbs. So we did this verb, å stikke, yeah, in terms of the insects. And then I took my son to this baby swimming class that we have once a week. And they have this playroom in there. I recommend them a lot. It's the baby swim at the Hofseter in Oslo. Really recommend that. They are the best baby swimming in town, I think. And they have this playroom, yeah, if you come early or if you want to eat a snack after. And they have some books. And there is this book about insects. And I'm like, look, this one is new. Shall we have a look? And he's looking for ladybugs. And suddenly I open it. And there is this page about humler, yeah, which is, what is it? Like a bumblebee or whatever that's in English, yeah. And it says that humler kan stikke. And I'm like, this is it in here, right? Isn't it? And it looks like a coincidence, but I wouldn't maybe notice it if I wasn't primed for it. And conscious studies, right? Explicit studies primed me for this. I actively looked up a word to tell my student with 100% security what it is. You might look up a word for yourself. You might have this vocabulary list in your textbook that you pick and choose from. You might have a topic in your lesson, and then you go off with that, not believing that your language acquisition just happened, because it hasn't, right? But immersing yourself into this 3D language matrix and exposing yourself and connecting the dots. So when you see something like that there is a word, or there is a structure, or there is something similar to what you talked about in the lesson or what you saw in Duolingo, stop for a minute, appreciate it, and really feel that, okay, now the synapses are being made. Now I saw the connection. Now I saw it in a different context, and in a real life context, which is much more valuable than what I studied explicitly for the sake of studying. And it connects. And if you see it 5 more times, you'll have it. Maybe you'll be able to repeat out some of the context you saw it in, right? So this is super important. And as I'm describing it, you already sense that this is something that takes time, doesn't it? This takes a lot of time. And when you are moving from 0 to just say A1, A2, you can make do with basically just the explicit studies. You will be much better off and progressing even much faster if you already from the very start combine it with exposure with books, podcasts, whatever it might be. Not podcasts from the very beginning, but TV, cartoons, yeah, so that they are comprehensible. But you can pass the A2 level without ever doing anything real life. You can, because it's such a low level in a way, right? No independence is required of you. An A2 level. And basically, if you just learn some vocabulary for the basic things, some clothes, some household things, some like work related stuff, but very basic, some transportation, some free time, you know, these topics. And you just learn, say, like 5 verbs like är, snakker, går, right? You'll make do with that at A2. But if you pull off the same at B1, you will fail it, of course, because there is this independence happening. So you already have to put in this 3D thinking and kind of immersing yourself in it and feeling yourself as part of the process, that like, okay, all these things are connecting in my head. All of these things are kind of coming to my senses and I am connecting them, and it's happening in me. And I cannot decide whether or not this item is getting acquired today or tomorrow in 2 months' time. That's why I'm saying that the process is chaotic and it's messy. But these aha connection moments, or these, oh wait, this is the one we talked about in the lesson, these moments of recognition, of kind of re-meeting the same thing and realizing it's the same thing, these are so valuable for really like building it up in your head, yeah, building the automation up. I want to give you another example that I had in a private lesson with a student. We were doing a listening exercise from this platform called Bazaar. I don't usually do listening exercises with my private clients in the lessons, but in the initial lessons, I always want to show them how to use it, kind of train people in how to use listening productively. So we would do some exercises together in the first lessons, and then this would be independent work later to kind of maximize the speaking in the lesson. But we were doing in one of these first lessons these exercises in this platform called Bazaar in the A2 level, and there is one exercise about food. Maybe if you know the platform, or if you've ever joined a free program with me, you might have seen it, because I like using this particular exercise. There is this lady choosing from like what's it called, like a smorgasbord, yeah, like this Swedish kind of concept of it's called koldtbord in Norwegian. So she's choosing some things, and she cannot decide, of course, what she will start with. She wants to take some sunmat and whatever. And then finally she decides, and then she goes on to say, nå vil jeg fortsette med litt fisk. And we were talking about this sentence, replaying it to unlock what was in there. And my student says, what's this fortsette thing? What does that mean? And I say, oh, that means to continue, like to go on. Yeah, the next thing she's taking is the fisk. And my student goes on to say, but wait, I know this word fortsatt. I know that means still. And that's a great aha moment, right? Of like being the boss, trusting your gut, knowing that, okay, I see a connection here. There might be one, there might not. But in any case, it's worth investigating. So we talked about this, that like, look, fortsette is the verb, and the past tense would be fortsatte, and the perfectum would be har fortsatt. And fortsatt then is what you call this participle, and you can use these as adjectives, and by extension as adverbs. So this adverb meaning still, or like continuously, or not continuously, but like it hasn't stopped, yeah, it's still happening, fortsatt, er du fortsatt her, liksom. This one is just taking the participle of the verb fortsette and using it as an adverb, yeah, originally. Of course, it's a like an etablert adverb nowadays. Now I'm in the language switching, so it's getting bad. But it comes from the participle of the verb, or fortsette, which is an irregular verb. And she's like, oh, you know? And when you go like this, oh, there are two things happening. Number one, the connections are being made, and you are becoming more competent at unlocking the language from your sources, which is great. That's a crucial skill to have for language acquisition. And it kind of works in this 3D structure, not just in your textbook, like I have this material to cover. When I cram it, I'll speak, you know, you won't. But kind of acknowledging that this is a 3D thing. This is a pool of language I'm swimming in and I'm picking from, and it's connecting in me until I have an aha moment, right? So this kind of feeling, this competence, this understanding gets stronger with every moment you have. And also you start believing in yourself much more as a language learner, which is also another mindset thing that you need, because we are talking about motivation before today and elsewhere as well, that if you don't believe that you can succeed, you will not get motivated, right? Motivation is not some kind of moral aspect, or like you have to build it up or whatever. You cannot build up motivation. You have to build your trust that you can do it. And if the thing is valuable, then you will become motivated as a natural result, right? And if you if you treasure these aha moments, you will build your confidence into yourself as a language learner, because you see, I can make the connections. I can understand the language at some level. Maybe you don't understand the explanation box of some grammar in your textbook, but you understand the language, yeah? Slowly, more and more, you are immersing yourself within, and you're like, okay, so I knew it well, that, you know, fortsatt was related to fortsatt, that there must be some relation. And then we spoke about the connection in meaning as well, right? If fortsatt means still, it means it's continuing, right? It hasn't stopped. And or fortsatte means to continue. So the meaning is 100% related as well. And she's like, oh, I feel good for this, you know? And a third thing as well, if you feel good about your learning, then you will be more motivated as well, and you will be more rewarded, and you will be more likely to do it and to stick with it. So these positive emotions are also very, very important. So I hope that these examples show it clearly that thinking in this way and taking this as the basis of your language understanding and language learning, that this is more important than following the textbook. Yeah, I also often say that the order of the items in your textbook, even though it looks like this is the natural order of introducing it, that's an artificial order. And the logic behind it, even though many teachers or language textbook authors would tell me that, like, no, this is not it. But I have a lot of experience with learning languages myself, using textbooks with students. And I know that the main motivation behind the order of the grammar, for example, in the textbook, is teaching convenience. Yeah, as I often say, it's not any kind of logic in language acquisition. Just on the contrary, if you study how language acquisition occurs, it's different for everybody, of course. But on average, if you take a big sample, and it's different in first language acquisition when a toddler is learning her own language versus second language acquisition, and it's different in second language acquisition in kids and in adults, and like it's all different. But basically, if you take a big sample of language learners and you check which grammar points they acquire, meaning use correctly without thinking too much, at which stage, you will see that there is some kind of, it varies a lot, but there is some kind of order of things. And that's very, very different from the order you see in the textbook, right? So this linearity of the textbook telling you that first you learn the gender of nouns, right? So you learn like it's ett bord and it's like en stol. Good, like if it only was ett bord and en stol, you would be done. But it's much more than that. And if you're learning Norwegian and you might be close to B2 level, you know that you still mess up the gender of nouns. It was introduced in the first unit, or maybe second, right? The first was the verb plus two, which you are also messing, right? And that's because, like I was saying, the acquisition process has nothing to do with this neat linear order that you see in your textbook, which is based on convenience and kind of, let's say, like linguistic logic. If you want to explain adjectives, like why do the adjectives shift? Why does this adjective has like t at the end and this one doesn't? Then you say, it's because it reacts to the gender of the noun it relates to. And at that point, for you as a teacher, if you don't want to get very many questions of like, wait, what's gender of nouns? It's convenient for you if you have introduced gender of nouns before. But then students believe that because it's in that order, I also have to cover it and nail it in that order so that I can be a successful speaker. But this is very far from the truth, yeah? My level is significantly higher than B2 in Norwegian. If there is one thing I still mess up sometimes, guess what it is? The gender of unusual nouns, right? I already have got a lot of, say, gut feeling for it. So even if it's an unknown noun, I already have the feeling of like kind of knowing that this is an intention word, right? But I got this gut feeling for this thing past C1 level. You don't get this, like, there is no way you can get gut feeling for this at A2 level. But the textbook has introduced it at A1 already, right? So it's kind of good to understand that it exists, but it will not get acquired just because the textbook is so linear, yeah. And some things take a lot of time, a lot of exposure. So gender of nouns is a good example of something that takes years of exposure to really get in, to get the gut feeling for it, yeah. You understand it from your textbook, you know what's happening. But if you remember it or not, you can encourage it by studying some high frequent items. So you can put quite a lot in by conscious studies. But if you do only that, you will stop very low. Yeah. So I hope that this makes sense. I'm getting passionate when I start speaking about like Varpo plus two and the gender of nouns. I'm like, you're putting the cart before the horse, explain this thing like in terms of linguistic logic and teaching convenience. When Norwegian kids determine the gender of the nouns by using it in a phrase with either bestemt form or an adjective attached, and then they're like, so it's like gott nyttår, meaning or has to be intention, right? They do it the other way around. And if you have a language which has gender and somebody suddenly asks you like, what gender is it? You would probably say it with like a word in front of it that reacts to the gender so that you are super sure which gender that word is, right? And we believe that we can learn it the other way around, just because it's in the textbook, because it makes some kind of progressive logic to explain it in that way. Yeah. Okay, so last word. I was talking about the fact that textbooks are neat and linear, but the real progression is messy and it's scattered. It's hard to influence exactly. You can push for acquiring different things, but whether or not your system kind of takes it in, that's not for you to decide in a way, which is frustrating. But if you know about it, that it's not a bug, but it's a system kind of thing, then you will sleep better and you will get less frustrated, I think. For me, knowing that something is normal really helps me to operate within that realm. So that's one thing. Language acquisition is 3D and messy, and you have to be combining your conscious knowledge with a lot of exposure and re-experiencing the same items, the same structures from different angles. And the baseline there is that if you do not get enough exposure, if you do not prioritize this over your coursework, if your exposure to books being children's books like the one about Humler that I read at the baby swimming, or maybe some easy readers, or maybe if your level is higher, then you might try this and Pingle's dog book series, which like it's a page turner, so it's good. There's a lot of space between the lines. Or you might try anything else that you like. You might try what's it called? Non-fiction, yeah. Fagliteratur, in a topic that you're familiar with, so that it's comprehensible. Anything so that you see the words in their natural habitat. If your level is higher, go for podcasts, expose yourself as much as you can. If your level is a bit lower, or if you like that kind of thing, go for TV series. But if you don't do enough of this, if you don't get used to this so that it doesn't trigger you anymore, then you will not have any places to re-meet these items, right? And if you just have it from your textbook, just from your course, it will stay linear and 2D. And then you will see that your progression is dropping in a way, or it feels like it's dropping. And it will never work in the real life, because the textbook doesn't even serve you the real life formulations, because it's just a model of the language. It's just this small tiny part of what the language might look like. And if you do not do all the other things in a bigger measure than the textbook, you will never have the chance to meet enough of that so that this 3D connection can happen, which is really when the acquisition fires up in your brain. All right. So I think that's the baseline. You need to get enough, and you need to know that this is a 3D process and it's messy inside your system. It doesn't look anything like the textbook, and that's okay. Everybody has it like that. Okay. The same invitation I was saying at the beginning, I repeated at the end. All my courses are running right now, so it's not possible to join at this point. But this self-paced course, Dare to Speak Out in Norwegian, about language learning mindset and about the most crucial techniques for speaking and for transfer from knowing into using, that is always open for sign up if you want. It's scheduled for 6 weeks, but you can do it in a shorter time or in a longer time. And it does include access to me through email to ask questions. And it also includes a consultation with me at the end if you get through all the materials. The link to it is in the live stream description. So that's something that it is possible to join right now if you want to get this in place. Okay, thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you took a lot from this. If you want, drop me a comment, drop me a question or anything. Drop me a request for a future topic for the live stream. If there is something that you would really like me to speak about, I will have a look at it. If it fits in, you might bypass my running list of topics with yours. And god påske when that comes. I won't be here live during the påskeuke, and I won't be live the week after either because I have some timetable issues. But I will do my best to pump out an older live stream on YouTube as a cut video. So I'm working on that so that I make it happen for you. All right, ha det så bra, and see you sometime in May for another live. Ha det bra.